Hello and welcome to the Hardison and Cochran podcast. I'm your host, Bill Campbell. Today is episode 3 of our special autism podcast series, along with Team Autism North Carolina. If this is the first podcast you've heard from this series, the Team Autism is a partnership between Hardison and Cochran, the Autism Society of North Carolina, and Carolina Sports. And what we're doing is we're getting together and raising autism awareness in the state of North Carolina, mainly through Carolina football. If you would like to join Team Autism, all you have to do is go to teamautismnc.com. And on that website, we have a lot of information. Each week of the football season, we're giving away a cool little gift that makes your Saturdays better with football. So far, we've given away a Yeti cooler, a football crock pot, just a lot of cool little things each week we're going to give away. But there's also a ton of information about autism on there and how you can get involved. Now, in today's podcast, I spoke with Jaime Marcum. Jaime is the Associate Director of Services at the Autism Society of North Carolina. And we spoke about the services that the Autism Society provides, the eligibility of them, how they're paid for, and a lot of other things. It's a very interesting interview, and here it is. Your title at the Autism Society of North Carolina is the Associate Director of Services. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you do there?
Sure. So, as the Associate Director of the Autism Society, my responsibility is overseeing all of the services that the Autism Society provides and all of the sites. As you may be aware, we have several locations throughout the state of North Carolina, and we provide a variety of services to individuals who are on the autism spectrum. As I said, my role is to oversee those services to make sure that they are going according to plan, to make sure that the services are being provided appropriately, to see what sort of gaps and needs there may be within the system, and to assist in minimizing those gaps if at all possible. There's plenty of other things that I do, but that's a quick snapshot of my role with the Autism Society.
Okay, and you talked about mainly services. What are some of the services offered by the Autism Society that you oversee?
So, Autism Society provides many services to individuals, like I said before, who are on the autism spectrum. That ranges from one on one services. We also provide residential supports to individuals, and then we also provide behavioral support services to individuals. So, the one on one services, there are a variety of services that stem from a variety of funding sources. So, one of the funding sources that we have is what's called the Innovations Waiver. That service is set up to ensure or help ensure, rather, that individuals do not go into an institutional type setting. Underneath the Innovation Waiver, there are about 17, give or take, services that an individual can receive. A handful of those services are one on one services. So that's where somebody would come and work with an individual one on one, providing direct support. There are goals that are associated with that service. Dependent upon what the goals are, kind of dictates the location in which the services take place. So, what I mean by that is, for instance, if an individual needs to learn how to make a bed, it's going to be much easier to work on that goal within a home setting. On the flip side of that, if an individual needs to learn how to make a purchase, that's a little bit easier addressed out and about in the community. There's also a service that is called Day Supports. Autism Society provides that. That is where somebody can go into a day support setting and receive either one-on-one services or group services. Group services are where there's one instructor and there are 2, 3, 4 individuals. However many individuals depends on the needs of the individuals, the goals that they need to work on, as well as the location that the services will be taking place in. There's also residential services. Within residential services, an individual could receive services either in a group home setting or an AFL. And an AFL is an alternative family living. So that's kind of the innovation waiver services. And in a nutshell, There's also other funding sources that we provide services under, one of which is state funds. Now, state funds um, are provided by are overseen by the MCO. The MCO is the Managed Care Organization. The Managed Care Organization is basically an insurance company. They're the ones who are responsible for overseeing services, authorizing them, paying for them, so forth. And within state funded services, the funds for that, the funds for those come directly from the MCO. So again, under state funded services, an individual can receive one on one services such as developmental therapy or personal assistance. And very much like the services I described under innovation waiver, they can work on a variety of goals um, that the individual needs to enhance or increase. And then there's also what is referred to as B3. Now, B3 is a Medicaid funded service. One of the services that the Autism Society provides under B3 is called Respite. Respite is primarily a one on one service, and it's meant to provide just oversight and supervision to an individual and to provide relief to their caregiver. So we've talked about innovation waiver services briefly. We've talked about state funded. We've talked about B3. And then last but not least, we also have behavioral support services. Now, within the Autism Society, we actually have a clinical department. That department is responsible for providing those behavioral services, which can consist of developing a behavior support plan and coming up with strategies and interventions for those individuals who may have more intense behavioral needs than others.
Okay, so it sounds like you have your plate full day to day.
We do, very much so.
How does the eligibility for these services work? What type of socioeconomic things like that determine how these services are rendered for the
Sure.
community?
Sure. So, as I mentioned before, when I talked about the managed care organization, the managed care organization is responsible for overseeing the services. They also they, along with DMA, Division of Medical Assistance, they help determine the eligibility for each one of those services. And so that eligibility can include, as you mentioned, the socioeconomic status, where, for instance, somebody has to be eligible for Medicaid or be receiving Medicaid in order to receive some of these services. Eligibility criteria can also include diagnostic criteria. So somebody would have to have, at the very least, an intellectual and or developmental disability, such as autism, in order to be deemed eligible to receive any of the services that the Autism Society provides.
Okay, and how are they paid for?
So there's a variety of funding sources that can pay for the services. As I've mentioned, there is Medicaid. Medicaid can pay for B3 services. Medicaid is also the sole funding source for innovation waiver services. So, one thing that's unique about the innovations waiver is typically whenever somebody goes to apply for Medicaid, they have to meet the income criteria. In other words, they have to be below the poverty level. When somebody becomes eligible for innovation waiver services, that income criteria is waived for the household. So instead, what they do, instead of looking at the entire household like they do for traditional Medicaid, they look at the income and the assets of just the individual who is going to be receiving services. So let's take, for instance, a child. There may be a child out there who has a diagnosis of autism who would not meet criteria for Medicaid because the local Department of Social Services, DSS, is going to be looking at the income and the assets of the entire household of mom, dad, whomever the child resides with. Now, if that child becomes eligible for innovation waiver services, instead of looking at the income for the entire family, they would look at the income for just the child. And, typically children do not have a lot of income, they do not have a lot of assets. So, therefore, they would be below the poverty level, which in essence makes them eligible for Medicaid services or to qualify for Medicaid, which then in turn will pay for innovation waiver services. So, like I said, Medicaid is the big funding sources that we can tap into when paying for services. There's also state funds. As I mentioned before, the managed care organization has a pot of money that is set to the side. It will pay for a certain array of services for individuals. With state funded services, those are typically provided to individuals who are waiting to receive the innovation waiver services. Now, one thing to note is there is a pretty lengthy wait list. I think across the state, on average, the wait time for innovation waiver services is about 7 to 9 years, which is why the MCO will provide state funds to help provide some services to individuals while they are waiting to receive innovation waiver support. Another funding source that we can tap into in addition to Medicaid and state funds is private pay. Individuals or families who are able to afford to pay for services out of pocket definitely can do so.
Okay, and if there's someone listening today to this, and they want to, and they're interested in receiving these services, who would they contact?
So there is a saying, if you will, in this field, which is no wrong door. And basically, what that means is an individual who is interested in receiving services can access them either by contacting a provider agency, such as the Autism Society directly, or they can contact the managed care organization that is in their geographical location. Within North Carolina, there are currently 7 MCOs. And so the individual, the family, would just need to determine what managed care organization is responsible for their county. Or, like I said, they can contact the Autism Society directly, let the Autism Society know that they are interested in receiving services. And we would make sure that they meet diagnostic criteria and see what services are available for them.